Well, for more on this deteriorating security situation in Yemen, we're joined now by Roby Barrett, live from the U.S. state of North Dakota. He's an analyst at the Middle East Institute. Always good to see you, Roby.
It's good to see you.
Yemen's political situation has deteriorated over the past month, as you know. There are a lot of players involved in the country. Jim Spellman was just reporting about all the various factions which are fighting with each other. What is the core of the instability within these different groups?
Well, the core of the instability really is historical. Yemen has never been a national state. Everybody has this conception of it as forming a central government. They were going to have a reconciliation movement. All of these things were going to happen. They were going to federalize. The bottom line is you've had about 5 or 6 different areas in Yemen. Each one of them, the people in them call themselves Yemeni, but if they start describing what a Yemeni is, it excludes the others. And so what's happened in the north, this term that we keep using as Houthi, is really a Zaidi reformist movement that's come down, and the Zaidi tribes from the north that have always dominated the north have come in and said, hey, we're being cut out of this. It was the central government, it was the Hashid, it was these people. We want our rightful place because we have always been the power in the north. And you have to ask yourself, why didn't the army actually go out and fight the Houthis? So they didn't. The reason they didn't fight the Zaidis is because most of the army is Zaidi. And we were trying to prop up a president, Hadi, who is a Southerner, who only fled the South because he was involved in an attempted coup against other Southern elements in 1986, and then became de facto vice president in 1994 and helped Saleh conquer the South. Hadi was a terrible choice. We liked him because he told us what we wanted to hear because he had no other support. And so what we're going to see here is we're going to see the Hadramaut, which is very, very different. We're going to see the Zaidi tribes of the north, which is very different. We're going to see the tribes from the Tahama, which is very different also. They tend to be Sunni, but they also tend to be Africanized and looked on as different. We're going to see Aden, which has always been different from the rest. And then we're going to see some of the other groups that were in the old confederations that the British formed back in the 30s and 40s to try to hold on to Aden. Yemen is not a national state. It has never been a national state, and it will never be a national state. And so talking of it in terms of this line drawn on a map and who's going to control it, it's not going to happen.
Let me ask you, was it widely known that there were 100 special operation forces in Yemen? And how big of a role did they really even play there? Is it significant they're leaving?
Well, I think that they've got no choice but to pull the special forces people out. The reason is that the idea there was they were going to train local tribesmen, particularly in the Hadramaut and in those areas where AQAP was the most active, to fight against them, and this was going to be coordinated through a central government. Well, the central government was weak at best, and now it no longer exists. And so to have them out there puts them at risk. And I think really what's happening here is that by removing them, we remove the potential for a lot of Americans to end up being killed and the administration to come under an enormous amount of pressure to go do something. Whatever they do, they can't solve the problem. And therefore, I think what they've decided to do is get U.S. people out of harm's way.
We've just seen the Islamic State claim responsibility for these mosque suicide bombers that killed 130 people. Do you think the people in Yemen are going to turn against ISIL, much like the people in Jordan turned against ISIL when the Jordanian pilot was captured and killed?
Here's the way this works. ISIL really is an offshoot. Now, they're calling them different things, but they're really offshoot of Sunni groups. And the people in Sana'a now represent the Zaidis. The Zaidis are Shias, the Sunnis. There's always been a conflict there. I would argue that Yemen has always been in a state of civil war. It just depends on whether it was a low-level set of clashes and problems, or whether it turned into something that was much more heated like we see today, something really escalated. And so really what we're looking for in Yemen is not a solution, because one does not exist, a solution with a capital S. But what we're looking for in Yemen is a return to an equilibrium where everyone has their areas, there's still friction points, there's still some fighting, there always has been. And what's happened now is that because of the turf battles, we've got significant significant fighting between groups. But this is not unheard of either. It's happened before. In the early 80s, there was the NDF movement, which was largely Southerner and Sunni and socialists against the Northern Zaydis, and Ali Abdullah Saleh fought through that one. And then in the 60s, there was the Civil War, which was basically, to some extent, North against South. And so I think what we see here is, right now, the cachet of al-Qaeda is not quite as bright as it used to be, and ISIL is the latest thing. If you want to get on the news, you want to get attention, and you want to get everyone stirred up, then you declare your allegiance to ISIL. But in practical terms, it's really an overlay of the problems and the conflicts that have existed in Yemen for millennia, and certainly in the modern age since the 1940s and 1950s and 60s. And so I don't really see that. I don't really see that the ISIL element. That's a propaganda thing to get more attention.
All righty, Mr. Barrett, thank you so much for your time and for breaking this down for us. We appreciate it. Joining us from the U.S. state of North Dakota.